It was the shoes that Justin noticed first. Cream leather, small, with a single strap across the top, sitting perfectly still under a chair at the far end of the ballroom, while every other pair of feet in the room was moving. He was not sure why he noticed them. He noticed a lot of things adults didn't, which his mother said was a gift and his teacher said was a distraction, and he had learned by now that both of them were right. He followed the shoes upward. A girl, sitting alone at a table near the back wall, away from the chandelier light and the noise and the forest of adult legs that filled the rest of the room. She wore a cream dress with buttons down the front, and her hair was pulled back loosely, thick dark coils escaping at the edges, and she was looking at something in her hands. A small folded paper, a program, maybe, with the focused stillness of someone who had decided that if she was going to be ignored, she would at least be usefully occupied. Justin stood at the edge of the room and looked at her. Then he looked harder. Then something inside his chest did something it had never done before, a kind of lurch, a kind of pulling like a magnet recognizing another magnet from across a room. Her jaw, her nose, the exact shape of her forehead. The way her eyebrows sat, straight, definite, slightly too serious for a face that young. He had seen that face before, every single morning, in the bathroom mirror, staring back at him while he brushed his teeth. He walked toward her the way you walk toward something you cannot explain and cannot stop, without deciding, without thinking, one foot, and then the next until he was standing at the edge of her table, and she looked up, and the program fell out of her hands onto the floor, and neither of them picked it up, because they were too busy staring. The same wide, cold dark eyes, the same full mouth, the same warm brown skin with the same undertone, the same depth. Even the way her hair grew at the temples, the same pattern, the same density, the same coiling at the root. Justin pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without being invited. She didn't object. She was too busy looking at him the way he was looking at her, carefully, completely, moving from detail to detail like someone taking inventory of something astonishing. "Your face," Justin said finally. "It looks like mine." "I know," she said. Her voice was quiet and precise. "I saw you come across the room. I've been looking since you were by the door." This surprised him. "You could tell from that far?" "Your jaw," she said simply. "I'd know it anywhere. It's mine." Justin considered this. It was the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever said to him, and he had decided already that he agreed with it completely. "How old are you?" he asked. 6. "I'm also 6. She nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. Then something moved across her face, the inventory expression dissolving, replaced by something quieter and less easy to name. She looked down at the fallen program on the floor between them. "I don't have a mummy," she said. She did not say it for sympathy. She said it the way you state a fact that has simply become part of the weather of your life. Justin felt the words land somewhere specific inside him. "I don't have a daddy," he said back. She looked up. They regarded each other across the small table with the serious, searching attention of two people who have just discovered they're missing the same piece. "That's not a coincidence," Maya said slowly. "No," Justin agreed. "I don't think it is." She was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened in her chair, the way she did when she had decided something. "If I gave you my daddy," she said carefully, thinking it through as she spoke, "and you gave me your mummy, we'd both have everything." The idea went through Justin like electricity. "Yes," he said. He said it immediately, completely, with every part of himself. "That is exactly what we should do." The grin arrived on both their faces at the same time. Enormous, helpless, the kind that takes over before you can decide whether to allow it. And for a moment, they just sat there grinning at each other in the middle of a ballroom full of people who had no idea that something important had just been agreed. Then a voice cut through the noise. A Korean woman appeared beside the table. Neat, composed, with the brisk professional energy of someone managing an exit. She looked at Maya and said, "Maya, your father is ready to leave." Her voice was not unkind, but it was final. She glanced at Justin and stopped. Not for long. A second, maybe 2. Her eyes moved between them. One face, then the other, then back, and something flickered across her expression that she visibly chose not to pursue. A question surfacing and being pushed back down. She pressed her lips together, gave her head one small definitive shake, and reached for Maya's hand. Maya stood, but she planted her feet for just one moment, long enough to look back at Justin over her shoulder, long enough for something to pass between them that did not need words. She raised her hand, pressed it flat, a promise without language. Justin raised his, pressed it back. He watched her go, the cream dress, the dark coiling hair, until the crowd absorbed her completely and there was nothing left to watch. He sat alone at the small table in the loud, glittering room with the fallen programs still on the floor between the chairs, and a feeling in his chest he did not have a name for yet. He would see her again. He was sure of it in the way he was sure of very few things. The way you're sure of something not because you have evidence, but because the alternative is simply not possible. He reached down and picked up the program from the floor. On the back, in small, neat handwriting, when had she done that? He hadn't seen her do that, were 4 words. Find me, Maya. Justin stared at it. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his breast pocket, exactly where it would not get crumpled, exactly where he would not lose it, and sat back in his chair with his hands flat on the table and the biggest, most private smile of his entire 6 years spreading slowly across his face. 3 weeks later, Betty crouched outside a 3-story building with white stone walls and a wide courtyard full of children in matching uniforms. She straightened Justin's collar, smoothed the front of his blazer, and held his face in both hands for a moment. "This is your new school," she said. "You're going to love it." Justin looked up at the building. It was the kind of tall that seemed to lean slightly toward you when you stared at it long enough. He decided it looked like it had opinions. He was not yet sure how he felt about a building with opinions. But he nodded because he was brave and because his mother's eyes were hopeful and because he had learned that sometimes the only way through a thing was directly into it. She kissed his forehead and watched him walk through the front doors. Then she sat in the car with her hands on the steering wheel and closed her eyes and said a quiet prayer the way she always did at new beginnings. Not long, not elaborate, just the essential request. Let him be okay. Inside, Justin followed the directions on the small card for the front office, 2nd floor, 2nd door on the right. He pushed it open and stepped in. The classroom was already half full. Children scattered at round tables, some talking, some coloring, one boy near the window already asleep with his cheek flattened against his bag. The teacher stood at the whiteboard with her back to the door. Justin scanned the room, and then his brain went entirely silent. At the table by the far window, in the same navy blazer and white shirt as him, with her hair pulled back and her hands folded on the desk, sat Maya. She looked up at precisely the same moment. Their eyes met across the classroom, and something ignited in both their faces simultaneously. A recognition so immediate and so complete that the 2 girls sitting nearest to Maya actually flinched at the sudden energy of it. The teacher turned to the sound of shuffling and found Justin frozen in the doorway, staring at a seated student who was staring back at him with equal intensity. She looked between them with the measured expression of a woman who had been teaching for 17 years and had learned to ask the obvious question. "Do you 2 know each other?" "No," Justin said. "No," Maya said, exactly the same moment. The teacher raised one eyebrow. "But," Maya added with complete composure, "we are planning to get our parents back together." Several children laughed. The teacher pressed her lips together very firmly, told Justin to find a seat, turned back to the board, and made a private note that first days were reliably the strangest days, and moved on. Justin sat beside Maya. They did not speak again until lunch. The cafeteria was the loudest room in the building. Trays clattering, chairs dragging, children releasing everything they had been containing since 8 o'clock. Justin and Maya sat across from each other at the far end of a long table, and in the noise swirling around them, they spoke in the low, careful voices of people with serious business to conduct. "I told my daddy about you," Maya said, peeling the wrapper from her sandwich with precise fingers. "The night after the gala, I told him I had met a boy who looked exactly like me." Justin leaned forward. "What did he say?" "He said I must have been looking in a mirror." She said it without expression. "He didn't believe me." Justin nodded slowly. He had expected this. Adults had a talent for not believing the things that mattered most. "I didn't tell my mummy anything," he said. Because if I tell her too much, she'll move us again. Different school, different area, different everything. She's done it twice. Maya looked at him steadily. Twice. Twice. He said it with the weariness of someone who had packed his room into boxes twice before the age of 6 and remembered every single time. The moment things get complicated, we disappear. Maya was quiet for a moment, filing this information carefully. Then she cannot know yet, she said. She cannot know anything yet. Justin agreed. Not until it's too late to run. They ate in silence for a moment. Then Justin put his spoon down and sat up straighter, which was what he did when a plan was arriving. Here's what we do, he said. We bring them both here. Same place, same time, without either of them knowing the other one is coming. Maya looked at him. How? You go home today and tell your daddy the school counselor needs to see him urgently. First thing tomorrow morning. He pointed at her. And I tell my mummy exactly the same thing. Her eyes widened slightly. And they both come here at the same time. Same room, Justin said. And then they see each other, and everything changes. Maya was quiet. She had a way of thinking that showed on her face, not doubt, but thoroughness, moving through a plan from every possible angle before accepting it. What if they speak to the actual counselor first, before they find each other? Justin had not considered this. He considered it now, rapidly. We meet them at the entrance before they get that far. We take them to the room ourselves. Which room? He thought. The family meeting room. Near the library. I saw it when the office lady showed me around this morning. It's always empty. Maya, turn this over. And if one of them tries to leave before the other arrives, we stall them. He said it with total certainty. We can stall them. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in his face, the absolute, unqualified certainty of it, seemed to settle something in her. She reached across the table. He gripped her hand. They shook once, firmly, with the gravity of a signed agreement. Then Justin held up one finger. A handshake is not enough, he said. He reached into his blazer pocket and produced a folded piece of paper, slightly crumpled at one corner, with a marker clipped to it by a rubber band, because Justin had learned at some point in his 6 years that being prepared was never wasted. He spread it flat on the table, smoothed it with his palm, and in large, deliberate letters wrote across the top, Operation, bring Mummy and Daddy together. He drew 2 lines below it, signed his name on the first, slid it across. Maya picked up the marker. She looked at the paper. She looked at her line. Then, with the careful, unhurried gravity of someone who understands the weight of what they're putting their name to, she wrote it. They looked at the paper together. It was official. That evening, Justin came home quiet. Betty noticed the moment he walked through the door, the measured way he set his bag down, the absence of his usual commentary on the day, the way he climbed onto the kitchen stool and sat with his hands flat on the counter without immediately asking what was for dinner. She dried her hands and sat across from him. Talk to me. He looked at the counter for a long time. When he raised his eyes, there was an expression on his face she had not seen before. Something between real guilt and very carefully constructed guilt, which was in some ways more alarming than either. I might have done something at school, he said quietly. And the counselor needs to see you tomorrow morning. Betty stared at him. In 6 years, Justin had never been sent to a counselor. He was the child who reminded his teacher when she forgot to mark the register. He was the child who apologized to the chair when he bumped into it. He was the child who had, at age 5, informed her with complete seriousness that she was following the car in front too closely and that she should consider the 2-second rule. What did you do? She asked. His eyes moved to the right. I'll explain everything properly when we get there, he said. But you need to come. First thing. She studied his face for a long moment. Nothing further was going to come from it. All right, she said finally. I'll come. The change in him was instant, a softening so rapid she nearly missed it. He composed himself, looked back at the counter, and said very casually, Can we have jollof rice tonight? She laughed in spite of herself. Go and shower. He was gone down the hallway before she finished the sentence, and she stood in the kitchen with one hand on the counter thinking that she had absolutely no idea what was happening, and that the feeling of not knowing had an unusual quality to it. Not dread exactly. Something closer to the feeling before something significant. something that had been waiting a long time. She shook it off and went to start the rice. Across the city, in a house that was large and well-appointed and had every comfort except the specific comfort of not being quiet, Song-hyun sat at the dining table across from his daughter and watched her eat with the focused, careful attention he always gave her in the evenings. The 1 hour of the day when the business of the world fell away, and it was only the two of them and whatever she needed to tell him. Maya ate 3 bites of rice. Then she looked up. "Daddy, the school counselor needs to see you tomorrow." Song-hyun set his chopsticks down with the precision of a man controlling his response. He looked at his daughter, at the composed face, the folded hands, the eyes that were giving away less than usual, which itself was information. He had raised Maya alone for 4 years, and he knew her tells the way he knew his own. He knew when she was working something out. He knew when she had already worked it out. "What time?" he asked. "First thing in the morning." She said it was urgent. He picked his chopsticks back up. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Maya said. She took a precise bite. "She wants to meet all the new parents. All the new parents. All of them." He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Her eyes stayed level. Her face stayed composed. He had no proof of anything. "I'll be there," he said. Maya looked back down at her rice. And under the table, where he could not see, she exhaled for the first time since lunch. The next morning, Justin was a different child entirely. He was dressed before Betty's alarm went off. He had eaten breakfast, packed his bag, and was sitting at the kitchen counter in his full uniform with his shoes already tied when she came out in her dressing gown, still holding her phone. She stopped in the kitchen doorway and looked at him. "You're up," she said. "I've been up," he said. She narrowed her eyes. He looked back at her with a pleasant, neutral expression that told her absolutely nothing. She wanted to make coffee. She drove him in, and when they arrived and walked through the main entrance, Justin took her hand, which he had formally retired from doing 3 months ago on the grounds that he was too old, and led her with a purposefulness that felt subtly wrong. She was the adult. She was supposed to be the one leading. "Justin," she said as they turned down a corridor she didn't recognize. "Is the counselor's office this way?" "She moved it temporarily," he said, not slowing. "Moved it? Refurbishment." Betty opened her mouth. They stopped at a door near the library. Justin pushed it open and stepped back to let her through. She walked in. The family meeting room had 4 chairs, a low table, a window overlooking the school courtyard, and no counselor. What it had, sitting in the chair directly facing the door, hands folded, blazer neat, with a piece of paper on the table in front of her and the composed, steady expression of someone who has prepared carefully for multiple outcomes, was a little girl. And standing behind the chair, one hand resting on its back, was a man. Betty's eyes went to the girl first, to the face, to the jaw and the nose and the eyebrows and the dark coiling hair and the wide, cold, dark eyes looking back at her. And something deep and cellular and beyond the reach of 4 years of careful architecture responded before her mind could form a single coherent thought. Maya. She had grown. Of course she had grown. 4 years was 4 years, but Betty had not allowed herself to imagine it. What she would look like now. How she would carry herself. Whether she still held her hands folded in her lap like that. And now she was right here, close enough to touch, and Betty's vision was doing something she could not immediately manage. Then she looked at the man. Song-hyun had already seen her. He was standing very still with his hand on the back of the chair and an expression on his face that she did not know how to look at directly. For years had not rearranged him. Same jaw, same careful eyes, same particular stillness he got when something had caught him completely off guard and he was deciding how to be inside it. He was doing that now. They looked at each other across the small room and everything that had ever existed between them. Every year of it, every silence, every unmade phone call, occupied the space between them without taking up any room at all. Justin appeared at Betty's elbow. He looked at Maya. Maya looked at him. Something passed between them. The fluent, wordless language of 2 people who have been planning together and are now watching the plan arrive at exactly the place they intended. Justin pulled out a chair. "Please sit down, Mummy," he said quietly. "Both of you should sit." The adults, somewhat against the direction of their own instincts, sat. Maya placed the paper flat on the table and smoothed it with her palm. On it, in 2 distinct handwritings, one large and slightly uneven, one smaller and precise, were 3 numbered items. She read them aloud in the unhurried, deliberate tone she used for things she intended to be taken seriously. 1. We look exactly alike, and we deserve to understand why. 2. One parent each is not sufficient, and we have both tried it for long enough. 3. We are not leaving this room until the 2 of you have had a real conversation. Silence. Song-hyun read the paper. He looked at Maya. He looked at the boy sitting beside her with his arms folded and his jaw set and his eyes moving between the 2 adults with the watchful attention of someone monitoring a situation he has invested significantly in. He put both hands flat on the table. Why do we look the same? Justin asked. He didn't make it complicated. He just asked it, the clean, direct question that children ask about things adults have spent years navigating around. Me and Maya. Why do our faces look identical? Betty looked at Maya. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She looked at the face that was Song-hyun's brow and her own jaw, assembled into something entirely its own. Something that had been growing and becoming for 4 years without her, in a house she had never seen, in a life she had not been part of, and the composure she had been holding since she walked through the door developed a fracture she could not repair quickly enough. Because, she said, and her voice was not entirely steady, I am Maya's mother. The room absorbed this. Maya turned to look at her father. He looked back at her directly, the way he always did. No softening, no evasion, just the honest face of a man who had always believed she deserved the truth. She read him for a moment. Then she turned back to Betty. You left, she said, not as an accusation, as a fact she had been given and had held for 4 years and was now placing on the table with everything else. Yes, Betty said. Why? The question was simple. The answer was not. Betty opened her mouth. That, Song-hyun said quietly, is a conversation your mother and I need to have. Just the 2 of us. The children looked at each other. How long? Justin asked. However long it takes, Song-hyun said. Justin considered this. Then he stood. Maya stood beside him. We'll be in the corridor, Justin said. We'll know if you stop talking. How will you know? Betty asked. We'll hear, he said simply. They left. The door clicked shut behind them. The room was smaller with just the 2 of them. Song-hyun looked at the table. Betty looked at her hands. The courtyard outside the window was filling with children arriving for the school day, noise and movement, and the ordinary momentum of a morning. And inside the meeting room, there was none of that. How long have you been in Seoul? He asked. 3 months. She paused. You? Always. I never left. He was quiet for a moment. After you and I put everything into work. It was the only thing I could do that kept my hands busy and my mind from going somewhere worse. He looked at her. You never responded to anything I sent. You stopped eventually. After 8 months, yes. Something moved through his jaw. I tried every way I could find to reach you. I even contacted your cousin to pass a message. She told me you wanted nothing from me. He paused. Was that true? Betty was quiet. At the time, she said carefully, I believed what I had been shown. And when you believe something like that, when your closest friend has sat across from you and shown you evidence and looked you in the eye, contact feels like something you have to protect yourself from. What Ella showed you, he said. The messages, the photographs. Her jaw tightened at the name. I need to ask you something, he said. Do you still believe any of it was real? She raised her eyes to his. No, she said. I have not believed it for a long time. Something moved through his expression, relief and exhaustion arriving at the same moment, neither one canceling the other out. How long? About 18 months after I left. She pressed her fingertips to the edge of the table. Something, she said, a small detail, barely anything, the kind of thing you only catch if you've been going back over everything looking for the place where it stops holding together. Once I found it, I couldn't stop finding others. She looked at him directly. By the time I was certain, I had already been gone 2.5 years. I told myself it was too late. I told myself you had rebuilt everything. I told myself that reappearing would only pull apart things that had already healed over. Nothing had healed, he said, flat and plain. Betty, not one thing. She looked down. I raised our daughter alone, he said. Not with anger, with the measured weight of someone stating the true dimensions of something. Every single morning, she asked me questions I could not answer well. Every time she saw another child with her mother, she went somewhere quiet inside herself, and I had to sit with that every day because there was no way to reach you and no way to explain it to her without making it worse. He paused. I'm not telling you this to cause you pain. I know, she said. I'm telling you because the children on the other side of that door deserve to have both of us understand completely what these 4 years actually cost. Betty's throat moved. Her eyes were very bright, and she was not managing them the way she usually managed things. I know what it cost, she said. I paid it from the other side, every single day of it. They sat with that for a moment. Neither of them looked away. What do we do now, she asked. He was quiet. He looked at her, really looked, the way he used to look at her when they were alone, and he wasn't managing anything, just looking. We try, he said, honestly and carefully, and with no promises we can't keep. We put the children first, and we take it one day at a time, and we see what is still there. She nodded. Then, with the effort of someone lifting something that has been set down a long time, I'm sorry, Song-hyun, for leaving without giving you the chance to speak. For choosing what I was shown over what I knew you to be. I knew who you were. I knew it, and I let it be taken from me, and I am more sorry for that than I know how to properly say. He was quiet for a long moment. The courtyard outside had filled completely now. The sound of children filtered through the glass, distant, ordinary, entirely separate from what was happening in this room. I'm sorry, he said, that I couldn't find a way to reach you that you could hear. He paused. We start from here. That's all we have to do. Start from here. Something in Betty's face settled. Not all the way. There was still too much between them for any of it to settle completely, and they both knew that, but enough. Enough to stand on. Enough to begin. Outside in the corridor, Justin and Maya sat side by side on the floor with their backs against the wall and their legs straight out in front of them. Justin was watching the gap under the door. Maya was looking at the ceiling. They're still talking, Justin said. I know, Maya said. I can hear the tone. It's working. Justin looked at her. How can you tell from the tone? When people are arguing, the sound is sharp, she said. When they're saying real things, the sound is different. Slower. She paused. It's slower in there. Justin listened. She was right. He could not make out words, but the quality of the sound coming through the door was different from what it had been 10 minutes ago. Something had shifted. He leaned his head back against the wall. When they come out, he said, we don't make a big thing of it. We just act normal. Agreed, Maya said. Normal. They sat quietly. Then Maya said, Justin, whatever happens, even if it takes a long time, we don't give up on this. He turned to look at her. She was still looking at the ceiling with that expression she had, the one that sat in her like something structural, like something that had been there from the beginning. The particular stillness of someone who has decided something completely and does not need anyone else to confirm it. We don't give up, he agreed. He looked back at the gap under the door. Inside, the sound continued, slow, steady, real. They waited. The trying did not happen all at once. It happened the way that real things happen, in pieces, in increments, with days that felt like progress and days that felt like standing still, and the occasional evening that felt briefly like the old version of something, warm and unguarded, before either of them could think to be careful about it. Shared school pickups where Song-hyun and Betty stood at the gate and spoke about the children first and then found themselves, without quite deciding, to talking about other things. Dinners that began as practical arrangements for the children's sake and slowly accumulated a different quality. Saturday afternoons in the city that started with Justin and Maya as the stated purpose and ended with all four of them walking somewhere without any particular destination, the children running ahead, the adults a half step behind. Justin and Maya watched all of it with the patient, calibrated attention of people monitoring something they had invested in deeply. They gave the adult space when space seemed to be what was needed. They arranged small things, a forgotten jacket that required a phone call, a school event that required both parents to be present at the same time, without ever making the arrangement visible. They had, between them, an instinct for this that neither of them could explain and neither of them questioned. It was 2 months into the trying when Ella called. Betty was sitting alone in her apartment, and the name appeared on her phone screen with the quality of something that has been approaching for a long time and has finally arrived. She looked at it for 2 full rings. Then she answered. "I've been trying to do this for over a year," Ella said. Her voice had none of the shape it usually had, no edges, no management. Just the flat, exhausted sound of someone who has made a decision and is now carrying it through regardless of what it costs. "I need to tell you what actually happened." Betty said nothing. She waited. "What I showed you 4 years ago." Ella paused. "The messages were not real. I edited them. The photographs were taken at completely separate times and arranged to look like something they were not." Another pause. Longer. "I built it, Betty. I constructed the whole thing, and I made sure you would find it at the exact right moment. And I made sure you would have no reason to question it. Because it was me. Because you trusted me." The apartment was very quiet. "Why?" Betty said. One word. Without decoration. Ella exhaled. "Because I had feelings for him. Long before you ever met him. I had convinced myself that if you were gone, that if he was alone for long enough, he would eventually find his way to me." Her voice dropped. "He never did. After you left, he became someone I didn't recognize. He closed everything off. He poured himself into that little girl and his work, and he never looked at me once. Not once, Betty." A long pause. "I destroyed everything and got nothing from it except 4 years of living with what I did. I can't carry it anymore." Betty sat at her kitchen counter and looked at the surface in front of her. "I know," she said quietly. Silence from the other end. "I worked it out 18 months after I left," Betty said. "Small things that didn't fit. A detail that contradicted something you had told me. I went back over everything and I found it." She paused. "I've been waiting for you to say it out loud." A long silence. "I'm sorry," Ella said. The words came out stripped of everything. No performance, no frame. Just the words themselves. "I know that doesn't reach what I did. But I am sorry, Betty. For all of it." "I know you are," Betty said. She ended the call and sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Song-hyun. He answered on the second ring. "Ella called," she said. A pause. "What did she say?" "Everything." Betty pressed her free hand flat on the counter. Clearly, completely, without dressing any of it up. She paused. "I wanted you to hear it from me directly. None of what happened was your fault. Not one part of it, not one day of it. And what I did, the way I left, what I took from you and from Maya by leaving, I am sorry for it in a way I don't have words large enough to hold." The line was quiet for a moment. She could hear him breathing. "We have time now," he said. His voice was rough at the edges and steady underneath. "We have the children. We have today. Let's use what we have." She closed her eyes briefly. "Yes," she said. "Let's." That evening, Song-hyun drove to Betty's apartment. He brought nothing except himself and the 4 years he had been carrying quietly and the simple, deliberate intention of a man who had waited long enough. She opened the door, and for a moment neither of them moved. They just stood in the doorway looking at each other in the full, honest light of everything that had been said and everything that was still ahead of them. Then he stepped forward and pulled her in. She held on with both hands, and the thing she had been maintaining by sheer willpower for 4 years, the careful structure of distance and necessity, the story she had told herself every morning about why things were the way they were, came apart quietly. Not dramatically. The way things come apart when the reason for holding them no longer exists. They stood in the doorway of her apartment for a long time. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were wet, and she did not try to manage it. "For years," she said. "I know," he said. "Song-hyun, I know." He held her face in both hands the way he used to, the way she had not let herself remember he used to. "We start from here. That is all. We start from here, and we go slowly, and we do it right this time." She nodded. He pressed his forehead to hers, and they stood there in the doorway, not rushing toward anything, not performing anything, just standing in the fact of it. And the city carried on around them as cities do, entirely indifferent to the private, enormous thing happening in a doorway on an ordinary evening. 1 month later, the house had a different quality to it. Not Song-hyun's house exactly, and not Betty's apartment exactly. Something in between, something in progress, the specific texture of a life being carefully rebuilt by people who understand the cost of doing it carelessly. Betty was at the stove. Song Hyun was at the kitchen island with a report he was not really reading because he kept looking up. Justin and Maya were at the dining table doing homework side by side, with the comfortable, unself-conscious proximity of two people who have decided they are family and do not need anyone to ratify it. It was an ordinary evening. That was the thing about it, the complete, unremarkable ordinariness of it. Homework and cooking and a man reading a report he wasn't really reading in a house that smelled like jollof rice and was warm and had people in every room. Justin looked up from his homework and looked at Maya. She looked back at him. He raised his eyebrows. She pressed her lips together to hold back a smile. He looked at the ceiling briefly, the way he did when something had satisfied him completely, and then looked back down at his worksheet. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Outside, Seoul moved and breathed and carried on with its enormous ordinary life. And inside the kitchen, Betty laughed at something Song Hyun said across the island. The real kind, unguarded, the kind that goes all the way up. And Song Hyun smiled the way he smiled when he was not thinking about smiling, which was the best way. Maya put her pencil down and looked at Justin. Operation complete, she said quietly. Just to him, just between them. Justin looked at her. Then he looked at his mother, and at Song Hyun, and at the warm light of the kitchen, and the homework, and the rice on the stove, and the whole soft, ordinary, extraordinary shape of the evening. Complete, he agreed. He picked his pencil back up, and they went back to their homework, side by side, in the house that was theirs now, in the life that was theirs now, the one they had decided on, in a ballroom, over a fallen program, when they were 6 years old and certain, the way children are certain about the things that truly matter. Which is to say, completely, which is to say, without any doubt at all.
And we've come to the end of today's story, guys. The story you find on this channel are always educational stories and entertaining stories as well. Through my stories, I try to preach moral values and give life lessons. So the moral lesson of today's story is that a family broken by deception can only be restored by the courage to seek the truth. Lies are most dangerous not when they come from enemies, but when they come from people we completely trust. Betty did not lose her family because she was weak. She lost it because the trust was weaponized against her. But what survived the betrayal is the most beautiful part of this story. A father who never stopped being faithful to the truth, a mother who found the courage to face it, and two children who never accepted that broken meant finished. Justin and Maya remind us of something adults often forget. Love does not give up. It makes a plan. It signs its name and it refuses to stop until the people who belong together find their way back. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget to please like, subscribe and share.